Good morning, Camille. How are you?
I am well. Good morning to you, Ryan.
I am so excited for this conversation. A little context for the listeners is I saw you on a panel at the Small Giants conference that I was at a month ago, and your articulation of your story was so fantastic. You like,
Thank you.
I didn't know how else to describe it. So, well, let's let the listeners judge for themselves. And I just really appreciated your story, and all the different zigs and zags. And so for the listeners, if you wanted to maybe just kind of just do a 50,000 foot flyby, and then we'll go back and kind of unpack it in the sequence, the order it happened.
Sure. Gosh, where do you even start? Right. So I guess I'll start at the beginning.
What are you doing? What are you doing now? What was the business? And then we'll go back and kind of talk through.
Yeah. So now at the present moment, I am the managing director of the North American arm of a global human-centric consultancy. So we basically work with global 1,000 organizations, so big brands that everybody would recognize. We help them to really understand their customers, and then we take that human understanding and help them put it into play for their business. And that could mean through organizational change or transformation for their business. It could be in their product portfolio. It could be in their communication strategy. The key is human understanding translated into really meaningful, positive impact for the businesses that we work for.
I think every company should use more of that. And I can just think about all the brands that I work with. Maybe they need to up their spend with you guys. So
welcomed.
Yeah, welcome. I'm sure we'll take it.
Yeah.
Why were you at the Small Giants conference? Like, what was your gravitational pull towards that philosophy in that community?
Oh, such a great question. So, gosh, I think that Small Giants, the whole philosophy, the book came into my life really early in my career. There's a consultant that my business has worked with for many, many years that introduced us to the book. And it always just spoke to me in a way that it felt very, very natural. I don't think that I fell into the business world maybe as a normal person would necessarily. For me, it was never about like hardcore financials and, driving the business to growth. It was always more about the people, right? Mm-hmm. And so Small Giants is so profoundly focused on the human dimension of a business. So reading that book and hearing the stories of all these businesses that really kept that, the client dimension, the employee dimension, the being part of your community, it just spoke to me in a way that it was like, oh my gosh, this book is like the Bible, right? For me.
Right.
And so, since then, and that was probably 25 years ago, I was exposed to the book, I would guess, right when it came out, I think.
Has it been out that long?
Maybe, I might be misspeaking.
But no, and I have no idea, so I'm not trying to fact check you.
2005, maybe
it's been out for a while.
It's been out for a while, but we've leveraged that book for the core principles of our business since we read it. And when I say me, my leadership team, we expose new people to the business, to the principles of Small Giants, because we just believe in it that much. So when, cool. The conference is in Detroit, we're in Detroit, easy to go there. Yeah. So that's why we met each other there.
Oh, yeah. It's so cool. And I agree with you. Like, just going to that conference, Camille, like, Small Giants, I would echo how you said that you felt like it kind of like felt like I was at home. And then same thing with conscious capitalism. There's so much of a theme of like, hey, do good, make money, make a big impact.
It's
what
like,
concept, right?
It's like the financials will come if you do the right thing, right?
Yep.
And it just do right by your people and you'll feel good as a human too.
Yeah, what a concept. This is a wonderful wrapper to then jump into your story because, and you actually gave me a great liftoff point of you didn't get into business as a business owner the normal way. So I don't know if you want to start there or like maybe start with how you started at the business.
Yeah, let's start there. So I was, I went to school, was in the business program, but still was even sort of flailing around with like, what's going to be meaningful for me in business? And I found this thing called marketing research way back when. And I didn't know it existed, as so many people don't. Even maybe looking at your face, you're like, what the heck is that? But it really is what I described earlier, like understanding consumers, understanding people to help drive businesses in a more human-centric way. With that, I got an internship with a great company, started working with that company in a particular group. And when John Gongos, who was the group leader of the group that I was in as an intern, decided to start his own business, everybody needs a little bit of cheap labor, right, to come along. He asked me as the intern if I wanted to be part of this startup. So it was John Gongos, myself, two other people that left one business and started we were the original four for what was called back then Gongos and Associates. And we were there was no non-compete in place, which was a beautiful thing for employees or one of our largest clients that ended up following us as well, which was awesome. Like, it's hard to start a business without, as you know, right, without having a solid
revenue
client base. So that helped to lift us off. And this was 1991. So any listeners that have been around that long, we're in a deep recession at that point in time. Like, the conditions were not right to start a business, but we did it anyway. And so we started that business. I was an intern. The business, has, we sold it in 2021, but at that point we're at 31 years as that business and grew it from 4 of us to eventually 150 people, with clients from around the globe.
Are you comfortable sharing the revenue? If not, no big deal.
When we sold the company, we were at about 27 million, if I remember correctly. Okay. And awesome. As of last year, we hit around 32 million.
That's awesome. And so when you guys start the business, who were the owners and what was the goal? Like, what was the conversation with the 4 of you?
Yeah. So we started the owners of the business. Honestly, there was only one owner, John Gongos, which namesake. The rest of us came along for the ride. But about 4 years in, maybe 5 years in, we were granted minority shareholdership. Okay. So at that point, there would have been 4 of us as actual owners of the business. The whole idea was really we were working for another business that we felt like we wanted to run a business in a little bit different way. And we thought we could have this great combination of a well-run business, like a human-centered business, while also being great researchers. I mean, we're all practitioners more than anything at that point, not business owners or business mindset.
You were the deliverable clients.
We did everything from receptionist back in the day where you actually took, the receptionist.
Were you using shorthand, Camille? That's my question.
No, I did not go that far. But the vision was really just to be a great marketing research firm.
That's awesome. And so what was the span? Because you guys obviously started to grow. And I don't know if you want to jump right to how you ended up as the business owner, if there's anything anything in between that you want to cover.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in between, I would say our philosophy as a company, very small, giant, was only to grow at the rate we could find, hire, attract and retain great people. So there was never this thing like, we've got to have this fast growth thing. If growth came by way of having great people, doing great work for our clients and having a strong client loyalty and employee loyalty. So that was always our motto. So, when you say 31 years and you only grew to 150 people, compared to a lot of startups, that might not sound so big or great, but for us, it was purposeful. It was purposeful. I want
to challenge that, because I think maybe a year ago people would have said that, but there's a lot of startups where their valuations, because they're burning cash and they don't have anything that's got a product pricing fit. Yeah. Where if they had a big chunk of cash flow that they could value, I think people might be a little jealous, to be honest. So.
Okay, well, there you go. I guess it's all about how you look at it. But just growing the business at a really steady clip. We were probably growing about 10% per year was about the average, and of course, there were some years where it was 20% and other years where it was 2%, just depending on how the economy went. But we had a great, well-run business. And in 2021, I believe not 2021, 2012, get my numbers straight here. We had a big doozy. Our John Gongos, the founder of the business, passed away traumatically, and from diagnosis of cancer to death was literally 8 days. He was diagnosed.
Was it melanoma?
It was metastatic. It was melanoma that had metastasized to 4 other organs. And by the time they caught it, I mean, there was just.
Isn't that crazy just in general? Like I interviewed another guy that his name was Mark Johnson, and his business partner, literally it was 10 days.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it just.
think that you could be fine and then literally that fast. Anyways, we don't have to.
Well, and he wasn't fine. Like for a year, I would say prior to that, he was having issues, but the doctors just couldn't isolate, whatever it was. And then by the time they found it, it's like, well, gosh, we know why you're having stomach issues because you've got cancer. It just such a tragic experience for him, his family, and for all of us. But that, I mean, in its weird way, became how I ended up owning the business and becoming the CEO of the business. So I mentioned he was the majority shareholder. There were 3 others of us who had minority shareholder interest. One of those people had left the picture, I don't know, a few years prior to that, maybe several years prior.
From the job, or are they still on the cap table?
Nope, they actually left the business, the job and the cap table. The person, he actually had a stroke. So he ended up leaving the business in that way. So there were then at that point, there were 3 of us. But one of the really critical moments, like you think back and you can tie all these things together, right? One of the critical moments with all of this is when John Gongos had some bad experiences in past life, right? About having equal shareholdership within a business. So when the other shareholder moved out of the picture, the person who had the stroke, there were 2 minority shareholders left at that point. John was really purposeful about giving controlling extra shares to one of those people. That happened to be me. So that if anything ever happened to him, it wouldn't be an equal situation. There would be a person that actually had the controlling interest. That was really intentional.
How did your counterpart take that?
I mean, she didn't love it. I mean, if I'm being honest, she didn't love it. That. But I think that we both saw the purpose in it and the intuition in it. And with that as well, there was a buy-sell agreement in place so that, again, if anything happened to any of us, there was a really clear pathway to how does the business or the other shareholders buy the remaining or that shareholder out. So when John passed away, his shares go off the table. We buy his family out with a combination of insurance as well as proceeds from the business, right? And then there's 2 people left with the remaining shares, one having controlling interest.
I mean, what a amazing human being. I mean, because all of the things that could have gone wrong in that situation, and he must have had a really painful experience in order to do all that because you only know it's necessary if you've
been through it, right? Yeah. And I think that it's I know, this title of this podcast, intentional growth, and you might not think about succession planning as intentional growth, but that was a clear plan for succession planning as well as the structure of the stock in the business. Yeah. And I think it's so important. Yeah.
Well, and you, like when you were on the panel, you saw my presentation as well, and you said the importance of separating the leadership W-2 from the asset, and you naturally, I could tell that was already baked into your mindset. So was that coming from John? And the reason I'm going down this rabbit hole is the definition of succession planning in your mind. What does that mean? Because that's different than maybe the buy-sell agreements.
Such a good question, because no one ever talked to me about hey, there's a difference between owning a company and leading a company. I mean, it smacks you in the face when you are put into that situation overnight, and it literally was overnight. But there was never any conversation around that. I was John's clear successor to lead the business. And he was at the point in his career where he was starting to phase out a little bit, even before he passed away. So even to the organization, it felt like people knew that I was that next person up. Yep. So, but that was to lead the company. The ownership piece is a completely different ballgame, as you know, and you really have to wear those 2 hats simultaneously when you come into owning a company, right? And no one prepared me for that.
So how in God's name were you so thoughtful about the process then? Because when you were explaining your story on the panel, and maybe you can do it again to some fashion of what you were thinking about. Should I buy this company? Should I do it? Should I not? And I was like, because most people are let's do it. What does this mean? And then after they sign all the documents.
I think, I'll be completely honest without getting too woo-woo here. When what happened to John happened, I really felt I know my purpose. There was never even a question. There was never even a question about, should I do this or not? It was almost like he told me what was happening. I've been with this business my entire adult life. I have such a strong passion and love for this business. Of course, I'm going to take it forward, right? Now I needed to make sure my leadership team was also in line with that. But there was never a doubt in my mind about, even with the financial risk that was at stake, we talked to my husband, of course, but there was never, it was always just like, yeah, naturally we're going to do this. And I felt like it was a purpose, a calling to be able to have the honor, honestly, the privilege of being able to take this amazing company, group of people, group of clients and lead it forward. Oh my gosh. That
awesome.
opportunity is just gives me chills still to think about.
What I'm picking up off of that, how you phrase that, it was about the purpose and the impact that you could make. It wasn't the money first.
For sure. Honestly, the money part, it's like my house was on the line for a while. Like there were the money part. No, it was more about the love of the people and the love of the clients and just knowing that I wanted to be able to step up to the opportunity.
Big was the team at that point?
At that point, we were about 100 people, maybe just shy of 100 people at that point, and a very close-knit group.
So then you go back, you were saying that you get to the point where you're stabilizing the business.
Stabilizing the business. So to me, stabilizing the business meant, okay, we just lost our owner. Is everybody good here, right? Are our employees feeling confident and like we can just take this place forward? Reassuring our clients that everything was going to be fine and we were going to be able to take this place forward. We had at least 3 high quality companies, I would say, that approached us, right? To say, can we acquire you at this point in time? I always felt like they were there to they thought they needed to rescue us.
We'll rescue at a very fair price.
Yeah, exactly. Let me talk to you about that price. But, and that's where I had the conversation with our leadership team. Like, hey guys, here we are 20, 21-ish years in. Most of these people had been with the business for many, many years. Do we want to take this place forward? Because it's going to be hard, right? Like this isn't going to be just like business as usual. We need to make sure that everybody's okay and we're taking this place forward. And it was a resounding yes. Again, there was nobody on that team that was thinking now was the time to stop. But we did take the opportunity, and I promise I will answer your question about the other shareholder in a second. I'm getting that through via this story. That was also the time where we took the opportunity to say, okay, 20 years in, we've got a great business here. We're profitable, we're growing, but the industry around us is changing. And, big data was entering the scene, right? So our mode of operation is talking to consumers, getting information, synthesizing that, giving that back to clients. Well, they now can get information about their consumers in a variety of different ways.
So this is what, like 2012 too, you're saying?
2012, yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking Facebook, LinkedIn, data analytics, like that's all like coming right to the scene. Your
shopper loyalty card, they're collecting information, right? Yeah. So we're looking at the scene around us and the changing client needs and saying, okay, we could continue on the way that we are because nobody's telling us we need to change, but should we take this opportunity to transform the business, set a vision for the next 10 years and become something, leveraging our core competencies, but become something bigger, more relevant to our clients and our people? And again, we said, yes, let's do it. So
how did you guys come to that conclusion? Did you guys like have practices that you do with your clients that you guys applied to yourself, or like, because this is like what you're talking about, Camille, why I think it's so fascinating is like with systems like EOS, which I love structured systems like that, but I find that they fall a little short on like more strategic decision-making frameworks of like right product, right service, right market, right fit, that kind of stuff. So how did you guys determine that it was worth the risk?
We determined it. I will say it probably wasn't the most scientific process, but we knew we had things that we were doing as a business that already diversified us from our competition. Okay. Good example of that would be in our business, we call it storytelling, right? So you're not just handing over information to a client, but you're literally creating a story that helps motivate their business to change. In very simple terms. So we took some of the things, we looked at what we were already doing. We call them our core competencies to say like, what are we already doing that we can either arrange in a different way to create even more value for our clients? Or are there certain capabilities that would accentuate these core competencies and would or should we build those out? So a great, for instance, data analytics, right? We were, really strong in what we will call marketing research analytics at that time. Think smaller data sets, like 1,000 people, 2,000 people. Big data, you're talking unstructured data, huge data sets. Should we bring people on board that are able to bring that capability for us in-house? So thinking about a few different things: data analytics, creative and design chops, as well as strategic consulting. Those were kind of our three key areas that we wanted to build up longer term. A lot of companies probably would have gone out and maybe bought those capabilities. We decided, no, we're going to develop those organically, bring some people in, but also use it as an opportunity to maybe upskill some of the people that already existed. So again, there's the future that they can see, like a reason to believe for the people as well, as to like, okay, I've been here 15 years. Do I want to keep going here or go somewhere else? No, stay here because we're transforming the business and you're part of that vision and that journey.
That's awesome. And I can only imagine, like, oh my God, because that's similar, totally different industries, but our old industry was like trying to evolve into the technology player. And so many people went the acquisition route, and then you're smashing together different cultures, different skill sets. I couldn't imagine you have the leader that passes away, you change the business model, and then you throw in a bunch of new people that are completely different. Like, nope, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
We just didn't think that was right for us.
Yeah,
and we probably could have changed courses at a certain point and said, okay, it's been long enough. We could buy a little boutique business or something, but you think you're going to grow faster that way. But I think, like you said, the smashing together of cultures and everything else slows you down. And it's already hard to change or to get people,
You're already dealing with people, man.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's like, you don't need that. So with all of that said, the other shareholder in the business just wasn't really lined up maybe in the same way with this idea of transforming the business. So, eventually I ended up buying her out of the business as well. Yeah.
And what was out of the three different avenues you could have gone, what was the route? How did you guys decide to change the business model?
Out of the three different, so those three things I just mentioned.
Did you do all three of them? Yeah.
We did.
You do all three of them?
Yeah, we did all three. We did all three of them. And the original was we sort of started them up with different brand names. So the Gongos business was just Gongos. And then we started them up under different sub brand names to give them a differentiated look and feel in the marketplace, so that clients we had been working with forever weren't like, well, like, how are these people now doing this new thing under the Gongos name? So we gave it a new value proposition.
Super interesting, Camille, because I've been in services companies or service tech-enabled service or product-enabled service, but it's always at the root, like, been service.
Yeah.
And it is so confusing as all hell. It's like, wait a second, you were a copper company. How come you can do software now? And it's like, well, let me tell you a 2-hour story. And so, like, yeah, it's so confusing. It's like, so very fascinating how you did that. And like, so were they, and you said they're organic, you bring some people in. Were there, how did you manage those units? Did you have like targets with them to see if they were working? Or
we did. Yeah, we did have targets with them. And one, I will tell you, didn't work out. I mean, 2-3 years in, we were like, okay, this one is not panning out the way that we thought it would. And so we took some of but here's the biggest thing. It was never, even if something didn't work out, there was always a positive in that we had experienced something, we experimented with something, and we learned stuff that we could add to either the core of our business or one of those other business units. Like I always talk about, the very first one we tried was kind of a bomb, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
but it was the thing that lit the fire underneath us and said, ooh, we can do something different though. Maybe it's not this, but we can do something different here.
It's super fascinating. And what I love about, like, what I'm curious of your thoughts on this, Camille, is like in professional services in general, I think that the more things you F up, the more valuable you are to your clients. Cause you're like, oh, guess what? We tried that and it doesn't work for these reasons. So the competitor you're looking at is probably going to deal with these problems that we did too. So it's I do find it valuable.
Yeah. Well, I say to our people all the time, it's like, okay, even if you don't have a traditional consulting background, if you've been here at our business for any length of time, you can consult our clients on a lot of the things that they're facing because we've been through it on ourselves. So you've walked in those shoes. So yes, we sub-branded stuff originally. And then eventually as those things started to take off, we ended up folding everything back under one brand umbrella.
What year was that? Like, what was the span?
Gosh. So we launched the first new one in 2013, another one in 2014. I think we brought them all together under one umbrella in 2018, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So what's your executive team structure look like? Because if Gongos is so passionate about succession planning, how are you looking at your team?
Yeah. So our team is basically a combination of the heads of functional areas of the business. So I've got, my traditional COO, the operations person, CFO, a growth which is business development and marketing, capabilities solutions lead. That would be, think of our products and services as solutions.
Like ops. Yeah. Like the overhead of the services.
Well, no, it's really more like taking things that are, that we see as growth areas of the business and making sure we're giving them a really good path forward. When I think about sort of the, progression or innovation to performance, we've got a guy, our chief innovation officer. I think of him as like fuzzy front end. He's on our leadership team too. So he'd be the person who's like looking for emerging needs and saying like, ooh, should we explore this idea? Talk to clients about it. Is it worthy of further exploration? Fuzzy front end. And I've got my
fuzzy front end. I love it. By the way, that's why I like to stay most of my life. It's just in the fuzzy front end. Other people do the other stuff.
Well, and you got to have a certain mindset to be in the fuzzy front end. And Greg, he does. He's perfect there. If we see potential, then we start to build structure around it, and it moves into what we would call our commercial solutions area. And those are opportunities that we see that could, if we spend the right time and energy on them, we might be able to accelerate those to be main growth areas. Then things go from there to our chief operating officer, who's focused on performance. Like these are the mainstay core things of our business. Her job is to make sure those things are running like a well-oiled machine. So there's sort of that spectrum, right? Where it's like everything's not made equal. All of our services are not made equally. We've got that portfolio going for us.
It's super fascinating. And I'm curious on services. Cause like I'm doing two things. One is like, because I've got the sales and the finance kind of lens of both sides. It's like the people that you're talking to obviously need to have the separation of the different, ways to describe it, but then the analytics to say, hey, like, here's what's working. But on the sales side, it's like, I always see if I can articulate this like this, Camille. It's like, sometimes when you're out there talking to a client, you need to offer all those things. Yeah. And that's part of like the flywheel, but there's going to be like 80% of the time they're right down the middle or whatever it is. I mean, so it's like this need for all of them, but then you're still treating them the way that they should be treated on the financials, but the resources, is that?
Yeah. For sure. So if I think about our business today, for instance, 70% of what we do would still be what I would consider, marketing research. So where we started way back when, I mean, obviously updated with new techniques and everything else, but that's 75% of our business. The other 25% would be these things that we've developed over the course of the last however many years. And again, more, different marketing techniques for those, or a different way of talking to clients about it. And every client might not want everything like you're saying, Ryan, but you got to have it all.
Right. Yeah. I love it. I love it. So then how, like, what was, as you're talking to your executive team, as you're growing, was there, how were you handling or thinking about your successor from your job? And did anybody else, like, did you do anything where like you're tying like compensation, like profit sharing, or like a phantom stock plan towards some target or goal?
That's a really good question too. So we did, we sold, but prior to that, we did have a phantom stock plan for the business, and everybody on the leadership team was tied into that.
That's awesome.
And that was the extent of it though. So everybody on the leadership team was tied into that. And we decided for many reasons, to do that versus offering more common stock. So many intricacies with common stock to both the person that has it, right, from a tax perspective and everything else.
Oh, you wanted to be an owner, Camille. Here's your K1, and by the way, your tax bill.
I mean, there are years where it's like, okay, why do I want to own a part of this business? Or phantom stock, it was such an easy way to tie people in, as well as get them focused in the right direction, right? How am I contributing to the growth of this organization? Yeah.
Awesome. And who were you? Did you have one person, like, was it your COO or specific division head that would have been replacing you? Were you working on that before you sold, or did the selling kind of trigger not having to do that?
So the selling triggered not having to actually pick that successor. Because I will be honest with that too. I mean, that owner versus leader of the company, right? When you think about your successor as an owner, that brings up a whole lot of different options or people, right? Than if you're looking at replacing yourself as a leader of or a positional leader. So it's like, now that I'm in the position I am as a managing director of a region, so much easier for me to think about succession planning than prior to that. I was stuck. I mean, I will tell you honestly, pre this, I wouldn't have been able to tell you who the successor of the business was.
Let's unpack that, because thank you very much for like saying it that clearly, of being stuck, because I think that this is a huge deal for, like, I mean, you think about that group that that room that we were in Small Giants, every single one of them is going to have to deal with this at some point. You know what I mean? And they could either choose the John Gongas route of like actually doing it like intentionally, or just pretending it doesn't exist. So what got you stuck? And when you were on the panel, you were explaining very clearly your thoughts swirling around in your head. I don't know if you can pick back up on that, but like what got you stuck and what was not clear?
I mean, I feel like if we're talking succession planning, what got me stuck is it became so much more personal. Not that I wouldn't want to, not that, you know, a positional leader is less personal, but like when you own a business and trying to figure out who's going to then take that business forward, it became so much more personal, where it was just like, I was trying to put myself into like, oh, well, this person doesn't have XYZ characteristics that I have, so clearly they wouldn't be like, that's the mindset I was in, which was not the right mindset. But it's hard to get yourself out of that when this thing has been your baby and you're trying to figure out like who's taking your baby forward. I could see a team of people. Like I was never thinking, oh my gosh, our team couldn't take this forward. But like to pick a person, that's where I got stuck in it all. And I will be honest with you too, like in conversations that I would have with people, I don't think there was anybody who really wanted it. I worked really hard, unfortunately or fortunately, and put so much passion and energy into that leader position as an owner that I think people were just like, I don't know if I want that level of commitment. I mean, these people are committed for sure, but maybe not in that same way. And I think it's part of the EOS model, you know, that whole, does the person get it? Do they want it? And are they capable of it? I could check the box on 2 of those things for a lot of people, but maybe not the third. And that's where you're just like, okay, does the owner...
The third would be the one.
They're really wanting it. Or maybe it was like, I sort of could do it, but like they would have to be complemented by another person. So it's like 2 people maybe could take it forward in the way that I would have wanted. And again, part of that is like me needing to get over myself, probably, right?
I mean, maybe I'll give you a degree of truth in that, but like, I think what you experience is very real for everybody. You know what I mean? It's like, it's your baby.
It's
and
one
it's
yours, right?
It is. And even though I talk a lot about ownership versus leadership, I think it takes a slight twist when you have a professional services organization.
Yeah.
And I have a friend that was on my show like a few months ago. He did an ESOP. He actually turned his company into an ESOP, but he helped me think through this because he had like 55 people, software development. I mean, like just totally the culture of like the beanbags and the dogs and everything you can think of. And he was like, and I think a lot of issues with like law firms, CPA firms, and those type of firms where at some point the people that are second generation going, I'm working this hard so they sit on the beach. Versus like, right, like a manufacturing firm or a tech firm or some, you know, product, you know, like it's more, there's more stuff going on where it's like a little bit more like obvious why someone could be a passive owner. But when you're in a professional services firm, like if you really articulate it, like someone else is working so someone else doesn't have to.
Which doesn't seem right to anyone. Like that wouldn't even feel right to me in that equation, right? So it was hard. But then it's like, if you're just looking at, okay, well, who could take over from me someday as managing director of a region? There's a job description for that. There's not a job description for owning a company. I think like that alone, everybody owns a company differently. I knew my way of owning a company.
That was really cool and well said. I like how you put that. Hey, everybody, Ryan here. Sorry for interrupting the podcast. I just wanted to say that if you're enjoying and resonating or wanting the level of clarity that Camille is talking about her plan and how she executed her growth plan, I highly recommend going and checking out the Intentional Growth Starter Kit. We're trying to make it easy for you to jump into the additional material. So we've got the Intentional Growth Financial Scorecard in there where you can take the assessment. You can get a view on how well you're running the company as a financial asset. You get one overall score. There's 5 videos where I walk you through a case study and how to project out the value of your company so you can forecast out your cash position, your distributions, your taxes, and the future equity value of your company. So you could have the level of clarity that Camille has. If someone were to give you an out of the blue offer, you could say, well, I need X amount. And with this deal structure, because this is what I need, that level of clarity brings a lot of peace. Trust me, I watch clients who embrace that after they do the hard work, and life becomes so much easier. Also, inside of the starter kit, we've included the podcast archive library, which we're going to be introducing the tagging based on different topics like valuations, ESOPs, private equity, etc. And then also we've included 5 videos, 1 overview video on each of the 5 principles, along with additional PDF resources that we've pulled from the Academy, because I just want you to be able to taste the experience of the Academy of what this knowledge can do to you and your business without having to commit to the 10 hours or the full Academy or a full boot camp. Go check out the starter kit. It'll give you an idea of what's in store and what that kind of knowledge could look like. And now I will leave you back into the interview with Camille. When you were talking on the panel, you were talking about how you thought about owning a financial asset and like why you decided to start exploring the sale. So maybe like how did this, so you're stuck with, let me see if I got this right. So you're stuck with the succession planning question for the reasons you just described.
Yep.
What happens after that? Did you then go, okay, well then I'm starting to look externally, and it maybe you went to a person, or was it a buyer?
So in my head, and we explored ESOP too, like that was also a piece of the equation. I mean, in my head, I knew that the most, like probably the most viable option for exiting the business, both financially and for myself, would be a strategic buyer.
Okay.
I don't think I was 100% settled on that. That just kind of came along with the territory, and we can get into that in a few minutes. But the ESOP equation, for a lot of different reasons, just didn't make sense with the situation that we were in. And
do you mind unpacking that? And to whatever extent you think you feel comfortable. And so I believe what I heard you say last month, Camille, which, because I always struggle with how to describe this to people that have been through our program, where it's like, hey, like separate leadership, ownership. Now we're talking about your asset. And so like with the ESOP, you can get half the money up front, you carry the other half. And however you articulated not being okay from an investor's perspective for carrying that, I was like, holy shit, can we put that in
I don't
such
remember what I
words?
said. I wish I could
doesn't matter,
remember.
and that's why I wanted to prime you a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, like, I don't know if like you had already like covered the job thing, and then you were talking about it from like an investor's perspective of like the weight of that. So I don't know if you want to pick up
that. Yes, I can talk about for sure. The weight piece of it was, so I mean, let's add this part to the story too. When I decided that it was maybe time-ish to sell, right? COVID had hit. So let's take ourselves to 2020, right? COVID had hit.
Do we have to? No,
can you believe that was 3 years ago at this point?
Nope.
That is crazy to me. But so COVID had hit. I had turned, in the midst of this, like 52 years old, right? Not that that's super old, but in my head, 2 things happened at that point. One, I knew that at that point, 30 years in, that I probably wanted to do something else at some point in time. I love the business, love what I'm doing, but also knew that there's something else out there. Yeah, exactly. I've been here since college. There's something else out there. There's a new thing I want to start. There's something new I want to do. And 2, from a financial perspective, so the financial asset piece, right? My family's main investment is this business. So much so that it even affected how risk averse we were with other investments, right? Very conservative with other investments because I own a business and that's a risky investment. So at 52, right, my husband and I start talking about this and it's like, all right, we should probably have some type of plan, not just for the succession of the leadership management of the business, but our financial future and making sure we know what we want to get out of this business, right? As well as the timeline for that. So that was the point in time, sort of the connection of all those dots where I said, all right, in the next 3 to 5 years, I want to have this place sold and me having actually exited and be able to do that next thing, whatever it is.
So from the little interactions we've had, when you say something like that, I actually believe you, where the rest of the population says 3 to 5 years so they don't have to address any of their problems, so they can just ignore it for another 2 years. And then they say again in 2 years, another 3 to 5 years.
Yes. Yeah. No, I know that situation for sure. I've seen it. But here's the weird thing about all of that is, when I said it, I was probably like the rest of the population, like 3 to 5 years. But because of COVID, I was pretty serious about it. Like, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, like this is like brings it a little home, done. Right? Yeah.
But I put it was almost like the universe was in those conversations too, because, and I think I said this in the panel, as soon as I sort of released that or liberated myself to say like, okay, I've got a time horizon now. That's when, as I explained, we never put the company up for sale. I didn't work with a broker. We had 3, not all at the same time, but 3 really great companies that I respected approach us. And it's not as if I hadn't had approaches before. I was never, I always talked to other companies just to, hear what was going on, but I was never serious about it at that point. Since I had set that time horizon, it's like, okay, these companies are approaching. They're great companies. Let's explore the conversations.
So before we go and follow that, trail, if you can do us a favor and the listeners of like, what was your understanding? So you said there was a variety of reasons that you didn't want the ESOP, and I don't know if it was just the carrying of the note or whatever, but also just what your perspective on how companies were valued. And the reason I think about that, how important that is because it's part of the data set as people are looking at an ESOP, looking at these strategics. Should I hire an investment banker or broker? Their level of understanding of how companies are valued and what they might get will impact why they chase something. And sometimes it's by accident. Sometimes it's like, oh, here's the reasons. And I thought you did a pretty good job of saying, these are the reasons I went this route. And it was pretty well thought through.
So I think of the value of the company, or the way that I wanted to be thought of in selling the company, is for whoever was buying us to be really keyed in on the future potential, the future value of the company, not just what we were doing today, but because we had put so many things in place to transform the business, and we were starting to operate on all cylinders with that plan. But man, there's still so much great value that can be created with the business model we created. I wanted the buying company to be able to see that future potential.
The investment that because you made the investment, the cash flow is not maybe.
No. Yeah. And so I feel like future potential was a big part of my value equation. And with an ESOP, I don't feel like that necessarily was as big a part of.
You'd have to tell one hell of a story to the ESOP trustee, like, trust me, it's going to do it.
So that was a piece.
Because if they're not in the industry, and that's an interesting point to highlight, because an ESOP trustee, it's such a financial valuation that it's about projecting the performance. And if you're evolving the company, there's not proof necessarily.
Well, and in fact, I mean, we had a couple of not so great years as we were transforming, as you can imagine, right? You kind of have to take a couple steps backwards from a profit perspective before you can get that big leap forward.
Makes a ton of sense.
So there was that piece, but then there was also, which I conveyed, I didn't want the monkey on my back anymore of owning a company. The idea of being able to lead a company and help people, help our clients, still wanted that, but I was ready to shed the financial and risk burden of owning a company.
Love it. So then when you had these people reach out, explain your team and how you were vetting out these offers and why you didn't hire an investment banker or broker.
Gosh, I think part of it, and it's funny because I can hear my, so I have 3 advisors that I've used from the business for a long time. Our strategic advisor, like he helps us with the strategic planning, the guy who introduced Small Giants to us,
Okay.
financial advisor, accounting firm, and legal. As soon as I made this idea of the 3 to 5 years, I talked to the financial or accounting firm, right? And he's great, understood. They have a whole arm of their company that helps handle mergers and acquisitions. And when these companies started approaching us and I started having conversations, everything was just flowing so naturally. I didn't bring him or anybody else in until things got more serious. The only person that was accompanying me on all of these calls was our CFO. And by the time we got to a place where we were talking deal structures or negotiating, it just didn't make sense to bring a broker. Like we were doing just fine without having a broker with us. And it also was one of those things where it's like, well, there's a whole fee structure associated with a broker as well. And we just didn't feel like, it might sound silly.
So,
didn't feel like we needed it.
I'll say, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second. I want to hear your thoughts. So makes a ton of sense, like actually 100% sense. And then the listeners are probably confused why I'm saying that, because I feel like you understood what you had. So like I have sat on this side of the mic, Camille, now almost 400 times. And literally people will tell me a story like that. And it's got to be 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 where it's like, they'll say something like that. And I'm like, like this one woman, actually, she had sold 2 insurance companies. She told me that. She's like, why would I want to do that? I have to pay some commissions. And I'm like, Camille, this is what I did. I said, Gail, well, was it a multiple of EBITDA or a multiple of revenue that they valued it on? She goes, what's EBITDA?
Oh boy.
That's exactly. I was like, oh no. Like, she went through that whole process and didn't know what normalized EBITDA was. So like my I guess long story to say, did you understand how it was valued? And if you were to go outside, like what would be the incremental value you might harvest by hiring someone?
Yeah. So we knew what the value, we did a company valuation every single year based on a formula.
There you go. Okay.
So every year we valued the company. We did it for me as the primary or as the sole shareholder, but we also did it. Remember, there was that buy sell that was in place when there were more shareholders than just me. That was part of that part of the contract of the buy sell is that every year we did a valuation. So again, if anything happened, we would have an agreed upon value of the company.
How valuable was that data as you were managing the business?
It was amazing, right? Every year to have that valuation done. So it was very clear. We knew a company's only worth what a buying company is willing to pay, right? So the valuation done doesn't mean that somebody else is going to pay you for that.
Right. But also and I can only say this because you saw the presentation, but there's an intrinsic value based on the financial cash flow. Like at least there's a baseline that you can say, at least I can.
Yeah, there's a baseline.
You can get a premium from someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
But like again, it's like it's insane. Can you imagine like the general population running a business and having zero idea?
It would drive me crazy because
I was gonna say, look at the reaction, like, oh, I know that doesn't feel good.
Not at all. But I think part of that too, you made me think something. Hang on one second. The valuation. In our industry, there also are pretty clear multiples. So we knew like, okay, here's what we think the value is. And if you times it by 4 or 8 or whatever, you kind of know around what range you're going to be. In our industry, it's either the multiples or it's like one-time sales, right? For a professional services
they're just
business.
They're just getting to a proxy of the cash flow anyways from that the rule of thumb. Got it. So awesome. But then you got these 3 people. Yeah, no, I love it.
Well, and I think so they were the advisors, right, throughout the entire thing. But I think the other piece of it, and really important to the story, is I didn't have to sell. Like if there's anything that I want to make sure listeners hear is don't get so far down the path where you're in a position that you have to sell or try not to. Because I think that's the other reason why I didn't feel it was necessary to have a broker. Because again, I had people chirping in my ears, like, get a broker. You could, increase the amount that you're getting. One, I didn't want to have the pressure of a broker saying, oh, well, you said you're going to sell, so we need to go out and sell. I could walk out of the deal structure at any point in time with not having one. And I knew what I thought the value was. I also knew my husband and I, like, we knew what we wanted to get out of the business from a financial perspective. And as
I
you
knew what you
know,
wanted. What a
we were
concept.
very intentional about that. But that knowing what you want from a financial perspective, it's only part of the equation. There's so much more to it. But that piece for us was always the, I'll say, liberating piece, because it's like, you could get more money, and we did. The 3 deals were very different. As you know, I didn't go with the one that offered the most money because I didn't feel like that was best for our employees and our clients. And you could be greedy and go, well, it's 20% more. For sure, I'm going to go with that one. But the other ones met the criteria of what we wanted out of the business. And I just didn't. Again, there's probably people listening going, what the hell? Why wouldn't you go for the highest offer? But I needed to be able to check more
I'm going to interrupt you
than
because
just the financial.
Well, I appreciate all that, and I apologize for talking over you. I get too excited about it. You saw the presentation. I was at Bo's conference because the people listening in, it's like I think Camille, like, and I want to go back and I want to unpack the decision tree that you went through with these 3 buyers, because I think it's super helpful. But it's here's what I find power in, Camille, is that because it's not about the financials first. And I absolutely agree with you. But the weird part is like the horse that we ride for our company is the financials. And it's only so that someone like you could sit down and be like, A, B, and C, here's what I need. Here's what it means to me. But then what I see people do is they can quantify the value that they're leaving to get what they want.
Yeah, that's a true statement.
So it's like,
that's
hey, it's going to be, I'm just making up, but it's going to be leave $1 million on the table. I get what I want, but I want these things, and it's going to cost me $1 million. Who gives a shit? Because I actually got what I wanted already. So like, it's like, but you need a baseline to know whether you should or shouldn't do something.
And that's the key. Know what that baseline is. That's right. Know what that baseline is. That's one of your pieces. And then there's, like we said, so many things around it. Like, what do you want for the employees? What do you want for your next step? And if you have a vision for your business, are the chances of carrying out that vision good? Or how important is the next company carrying out that vision? How important is that to you? Like, to me, those are sort of the 4 things surrounding the decision.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So why, as you're talking to these 3, what was the process for you to get comfortable with the data that you gathered on the 3 buyers and how they were representing those things that you just mentioned?
When you say process, like meaning talking to them, like getting the information back from them.
Yeah. Like, how did you get to the point? Because like people can say stuff and not mean it. So like there's a combination of like getting the information, believing the information, and then making sure that it's going to happen afterwards. Yeah. So how did you get it and then compare the 3?
It's, gosh, I mean, it's tricky, right? For everybody. But I think that it was a lot of conversations, like being part of this process. And again, a good reason for not bringing too many people into the process, it sucks up a ton of time, right? Like, you're trying to manage a business and keep things focused on growing the business, because of course you want it to grow so you can get the value from it. But you've got this whole side job about talking to other people about your business, but just as important, like you're saying, making sure you're getting that information back from them. So, when I think about those things I just mentioned, financial, let's take that out of the equation right now, because it's easy to figure out that part.
Well, you were clear on it, so we can actually just move on.
Yeah.
It's like that simple.
So the second piece is really exploring the employee and client dimension, right? So if we go this route, what's going to end up with our employees? What's going to end up with our clients? And then the whole future of the business part of it. So for instance, one of the companies, so there was one company, the one we ended up going with, right? It was with us for the entire time. Started talking to them late in 2020, ended up selling late in 2021. The second company came into the picture not too long after that. Fairly easy to eliminate that one after multiple conversations, because we knew that the vision of the business was not going to go forward under that situation. And that was so important. No, we're not going to go that direction.
Clarity.
Yeah. So then lots and lots of conversations with this one business that we ended up going with. I'll just say it, Insights Consulting.
What was the third one?
The third one, so this is a fun part of the story, right? The third one doesn't come in until we're in the place with Insights Consulting that we are right about to say like, yep, we are committed to exclusivity for the due diligence process, right? Like at a certain point, you have to say, I'm not talking to any more companies. We'll go through due diligence together. At that point in time, I got this email from a company that was, it was one of those companies that when we were thinking about our vision of transforming the business, this would have been one of the companies that we were like, oh, we want to be like them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So getting the email to begin with is like, wait, is this spam? Like what is, what is taking place right now?
Especially at the timing that it probably came in.
Like, how could this be? But it was legit. And so we said, okay, again, purposeful, intentional. We're going to pause for a second. I was really upfront with the company, company one, and said, look, there's another company who's approached us. This is a really important decision for us. Obviously, we're going to pause for a second and explore things with that company. And we did.
How did they take that?
I mean, of course they weren't super happy about it, I'm sure. But it was,
obviously they were they mature about it? And
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. There was never any animosity, always really good vibes and a good relationship through the whole thing. And honestly, if they hadn't been, right, that's a really good cue to tell you what they might be like.
That's what I was getting there.
Right.
Right. I love it when you throw kind of a little bit of a wrench in the process like that, because then you can see how people really are.
Yeah. No.
And so,
I mean, they were disappointed, of course, because it was a bit of a setback. It happened at a nice opportune time. It was like June, July. This company's in Europe. Europe goes on holiday for them. I'm kidding about that, but it's
I know. I'm in I don't know, Camille. I'm in Minnesota. I just got on and told you, like, I mean, it's like I have like only 4 months of stuff that I can do, and then I just work for the other 8 because
I know I'm in Michigan. It's similar. I get it. Yes.
So no exclusivity then?
So not at that point. So we stopped. We paused. We also let the business that had approached at the last minute know that we were in serious talks with another business. And so that if we were going to go through with like the conversations and seeing if this was viable, it needed to be quick. So we did though. They knew our timeline. Everybody was, I was very transparent with everyone about like, this is what's happening right now. And again, I feel like we could be transparent because we didn't have to sell.
You didn't have to sell. I love it. I know. It's like, who wants this? We got a lot of cash flow and a lot of good stuff going. I love it.
So I had all those conversations, netted out with an offer, and again, a great offer. But that one didn't check the boxes of the employee piece that was really important to us, the culture piece that was important, as well as potentially the transformation efforts. I think it could have happened with the transformation efforts. It just wasn't as clear. Like there wasn't as much assurance of a joint future with the late in the game company. Even like I said, the offer was better, but so many of those intrinsic boxes weren't checked in the right way. And I mean, I've always called myself like, data is important to me, but my gut is the most important thing.
I was just going to ask, how did you, no, I love that. Cause it's the gut and then verify or whatever order it is. But like, so what, because of these things that you're disqualifying them for are potentially major, like intangibles, but also we both agree that they're sometimes the most important thing, but they're not easily quantifiable. So how did you actually make that judgment?
Yeah. Well, for instance, one of the beautiful things about the, joining of forces with Insights Consulting was they didn't have a US presence. Right. They had presence in EMEA and APAC, but nothing in the US. Well, the small office in New York, I shouldn't say nothing, but it wasn't a large presence in the US. Mm-hmm. So that gave us the autonomy to be the US presence and to hopefully continue on with the vision and the plan that we had already set out in the US. And there was always also a spirit of, we want to learn together. We're not coming in to say, this is the way you have to do things. We see what you've done. We want to learn just as much from you and transform our business too. The other business, that wasn't the same. And because they had a US presence, some of our people would have been laid off for sure. Like there would have been redundancy in functions. And that's when I say not good for employees. I would have had a decent number of people that wouldn't have been needed in that equation. And I wasn't like, part of my goal wasn't to get rid of people with having the business. I wanted to, as much as possible, protect employees, protect clients.
Oh, and I love it, Camille, because I know that based on what you'd already said, you had your decision criteria already laid out. So you knew how to quantify what you just said. And so many people, they can do that, but then they don't have they don't value the company every year. They don't know. I mean, so there's no relativity. Which
there's
is
no
just
benchmark.
crazy.
Like there isn't that, like have some type of a framework that you're working off of.
Well, yes, and hopefully. So that's so fantastic. So so then you go back to conversations with Insight.
So we go back to conversations with Insights, sign the exclusivity agreement, and then we start going through due diligence.
I was due diligence. Super fun. Like,
oh my God. Again, the only other person who knew about this at this point, beside the outside advisors, was our CFO. And I mean, she, bless her heart, great strategic advisor in her own right, but also she bore the brunt of the due diligence because of the position she was in, right? I mean, it was hard on her. She was a phantom shareholder though. So she did, luckily, thank goodness, she, that work was, put to good. She profited from the sale too, as all the phantoms did.
How clean was everything? Because and how big did the data room get? Because I think people, like you had already mentioned,
big. I mean, they asked for a lot. And again, remember too,
thousands of docs.
Oh, thousands of documents and 3-year history, right? I think we had to go back 3 years. 2020. So this is 2021. 2020 was the worst year of our history. So there was a lot of proving that 2020 was a blip on the radar, guys. This isn't real. Like this is not a good picture. And luckily, I mean, in a way, having the process take almost a year, it was actually over a year, was to our benefit, because 2021 was a phenomenal year for us. So it was easy to say you saw 2020, but look at what we're doing in 2021. Like we're doing great in 2021.
I love that, Camille, because when here's a phrase that I say, I don't say it the same all the time, but it's, we as entrepreneurs and business owners can tell one hell of a story of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And then when you're sitting in that due diligence, when you're talking to the buyer, the prove it stage is the son of a gun. And it's because you're literally I'm proving the story, but you have to prove it in the numbers and the documents. That's the way.
That's just, they want black and white, right? Like the proof is in the black and white, and that we had all of 21 to prove it. And that really helped us, I think, quite a bit.
Did you use your past valuations as part of your storytelling too?
I can't honestly remember if we did or not. We probably
I'm sure your
did.
CFO did.
I'm sure she
conversations
did.
At least.
Yeah. But it's interesting because our valuation, there's the EBITDA thing, but again, it's like for us, it's so backward, I think, but it was never about the numbers. It was always about look at our client roster, look at the people that we have, look at our ability to build capabilities organically that are creating value for the marketplace. That was the front of the story for us always. Well, and
I think that goes, I actually think that is the right order, oddly enough. I think it's the right order. And I think that that's how entrepreneurs naturally do it. What happens is the preparation that you've done, people can't validate their story, which is the problem. It's because you didn't do all this work, you're not getting credit for what you actually deserve as credit. Right. So it's this, it is ass backwards, but it's here's the story, but then prove it. And the prove it is just in the technical stuff.
Yeah. Truth.
So what is so you close the deal, you and I were talking and there was a conversation on the panel about telling your team.
Yeah.
So you want to just give us your thoughts and philosophies on why you only brought in your CFO and the advisors, and then when you told your team?
I will. Yeah. So again, I keep saying throughout the course of this, I was so protective of the employees, right? And so it might be easy to say, yeah, but you didn't tell your employees. That was purposeful. Couple different things there. One, it sucks up a lot of energy to be focused on this thing. And we had a busy year that year. Number one, we needed people to be focused on client work and getting work done, right? So more people involved in this, the more people not involved in client work. But I mean, the honest reason for not sharing with more people was simply, we didn't have to sell. And I knew that there was the possibility. I wanted to give myself the freedom that at any point in time, if we needed to walk away or if the deal went south, that it wasn't harming anybody else's psyche, right? Like imagine learning that you're this business that you've been working in, that you've decided to sell. Like for a lot of the people that have been there a long time, that's an emotional blow for a lot of people. Oh. And if it ended up being a false alarm, that could give so much more detriment to the business than protecting them from that news until it was legitimately done. And then we came up with an extremely thoughtful communication plan and town halls once a week to talk to people and make sure everybody was doing okay.
I love it, Camille. And like when you and I, before we hit record, I was telling you a little bit of my story and I can repeat a little bit of it because someone had asked you and was challenging in this. And what I heard in our conversation already is you protected them by choosing the right buyer.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that was, yes.
And that's because you had the intrinsic principle of making sure that happened. And from my own perspective, actually, what I did not tell you before we hit record is given the fact that I was running the business with my dad and I, he every other week selling, not selling, selling, not selling. I'm like, for God's sakes, like I mean, just as the executive who is family, who I will do whatever because it's just duty.
Right.
It's like I'm an all-in person. So I'm like, I don't know what to be all in right now. The mental calories and the cognitive, I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance, but like, it's like, I can't do both because do I rally these people and hire this person or not? And so what I did tell you is I told a couple of my really dear friends who were my top salespeople, and one of the times, and we didn't sell, and he never got over it. He actually, when we finally sold, Camille, he goes, Ryan, I'm so happy you sold because I've been looking for a year after you told me.
And I
was like, I'm so sorry, dude. I'm like, I've been screwed in the head. I'm sorry I did that to you. And it was my fault as a leader. I got him involved into our mess of uncertainty. And as leaders, it should be.
And I think here's the other piece. It would have been different if we were going to sell and I was leaving the business. That wasn't the case for us either. And part of me says, like, do people sit around every day thinking about who owns the business? Probably not. They just want to be in an environment that feels stable and secure and that they can count on going on that way. And that was the truth. Like I had no intent to like sell and leave. I mean, clearly here we are 18 months later. My title has changed, but what I do for the business, how we're running the business, is it a little more complicated because we're part of a global organization? Yep. But I mean, the day-to-day for most people is pretty much the same. The culture is the same, right? The things that we're selling to our clients, we have some new capabilities we added, but the basis of what we're doing, it's the same. So again, I
love it. Let me pull something out. Cause so if you think now for a second, Camille, if you would have sold to that other person, nothing would be the same.
No, that would have been very different.
Would you? So here's an interesting way of putting that. Let's say you had that pile of cash, then the extra cash from the other buyer, and you were dealing with all of the catastrophe and the chaos. How many people have been on this show that would I can probably guarantee they would say, I would write a check to avoid all of this emotional shit right now.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Well, you could have, you just didn't.
You just didn't. Yeah. And that's again, so go back to know how much you actually need or, from the sale, versus what you might want or it sounds silly again, but it's like, you can only have so much, right? And it's like the people part of the business, relationships, connections with people, that's so much more important than the financial.
So how did you guys take that spirit and then communicate it in the exciting, opportunistic, loving way that you wanted to?
So we spent we sold on December 28th. So that is when we shut down between the holidays, right? So shut down other than my CFO and I, we did not shut down. We were like burning the midnight oil.
You'll never forget that holiday
it's like
season.
Christmas Eve, we're sitting there on the phone forever. So during that period of time, I needed to let the phantom shareholders know that this had taken place. So my due diligence needed to be like, you sell the company, they need to know immediately. So I couldn't wait until holiday break was over with because they were all going to get cash deposited into their bank accounts on December 29th or whatever.
We need your bank routing number. Yes. Wait, what?
So brought all those guys together within a day, right before the final documents, I think we probably signed and then called them together. Everybody was kind of like, what the heck is going on? We're on Christmas break. Why would we be getting together? I think a couple of them were like, oh, I bet she sold
There's only
company.
one reason. Yeah.
Right? Unless this is really, really bad so let them know. Most were very surprised that it happened. Took questions and was there for them over the course of the break to talk. But our HR director at the time, and I spent a lot of time starting to figure out how we were going to message this to the company. The announcement, like the press release about it, wasn't going out until maybe the second week of January. So we had some time. It's not as if the rest of the company, our clients, needed to know that a financial transaction had taken place. So we were able to give ourselves a little bit of space to figure out how best to talk to employees, thinking about like, why should they believe in this, right? Like, what are their reasons to believe is one of the most important pieces of that. And we were honest about what happened and why I did it, like what my mental space was and why I decided now is the right time. We were honest about the fact that this was not necessarily the only option, but went with this option for these reasons. And then, people are going to deal with change in different ways, but, we're very open door policy about, hey, if you've got an issue with this or you're excited about whatever, like talk, come into my office, whatever we need to do to make you feel okay about this. We were just there for people, and we had informal, conversations, but we actually set up formal like town hall meetings, I think for the first month afterwards, once a week, where people could come. Oh, cool. And we pre-thought FAQs, like we had, it was pretty buttoned up. We help clients with this kind of thing, change management, we call it. So we used those principles on ourselves.
How did everybody take it?
Totally mixed. Honestly, even from leadership all the way through to, the most junior people in our company, very mixed. I think the less experienced you were, the more excited you were about it. I think the more tenured you were, the less excited, because again, think company of 150, your position in that. If you're a top leader, you're a top leader, right? And now we're entering a company.
Wait a second, the top is way bigger now.
It's a lot further away at this point. And I get that. Like I could put myself, I have put myself in those shoes. I now have a boss, right? I have a reporting structure. And so I totally get it. But also an amazing opportunity. One piece of this that I think is important, and I can't believe I forgot to convey, probably 5 years before the transaction took place, we were sitting around in a leadership team meeting. We meet quarterly for our strategic planning, right? And I posed a question to the team, very small giant-y question, which is, why grow? Like, we don't have to grow. We can have a great company, service clients really well. You don't have to grow. So why should we grow? Should we grow? And if so, like, what's your reason, each individual around the table, for growing? My reason for that was, I really felt like we had an opportunity to take what I would call our special sauce, like our value proposition, right, to more clients that didn't know we existed at that point, as well as more potential employees of the company. Like, I thought that was a reason to grow. Like, we do something really special. People love what we do.
The world was better.
The world,
if you guys are bigger.
Yep. So that was my reason. I never, when I said that, would have envisioned that route to growth was through being acquired. But that's how it played out. And I stood on that same proposition after the acquisition, like, okay, think about this. We now have a larger platform for growth. We've got a global platform for growth and colleagues around the world that we get to learn from, but that also want to learn from us. Again, part of the important piece here is it wasn't as if we were being absorbed into a machine that didn't want to hear from us. We got to bring our special sauce to that table and mix it with all the other.
And are they using it? Are they actually holding true with their promise of wanting to learn from you?
There's a
while you're
lot of
learning from them?
stuff, that we talk about, like reverse integration, right? So it's not everything is going one way. We're coming to the table and really thinking about what makes sense for the global organization. So yeah.
It's just so awesome. So Camille, like when you think about how I even teed up my presentation at the conference of Bo's 75%, 25%, 75% people not happy.
Yep.
When you look back at the whole journey, how would you happy? You proud?
I think I made the right decision. Like I just feel for so many reasons, both personally and professionally. Yeah. Yes.
That makes me so happy. I love it when people get what they expected and they did it on purpose. It's just like, I love it. What's it like having that monkey off your back from the ownership perspective?
It's honestly really, really nice. I mean, I think that, COVID happened, that had its own complications, but then we went through the whole great resignation, right? Being an owner of a business with that happening, so different than being a leader of a business. Again, it's stressful no matter what, but as the owner, it takes it to a whole different level of gratitude, especially when you're in a professional services business, right? Trying to make sure that you're keeping the people there and still just as committed to that, but the seriousness of it just isn't quite as finite when you don't own it.
Yeah, because you can always walk away from your job. It's not tied to your whole retirement.
Right, exactly. And I mean, not that I would, but like it's liberating. A friend of mine put it this way. It's like, it's almost like you've had back issues your entire year or entire life and didn't know it. And then you go to a chiropractor and they do an adjustment and you're like, oh, that's what it feels like not to have. I kind of feel
now I'm going to start day trading. Now we can take the risk. We can do whatever we want with our money.
No, it's good.
This is so fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this story. It's there's so many lessons to be learned from it, and I usually wrap up with two questions.
Yeah.
The word intentional, you've used it a bunch, and I don't think you even did it on purpose. It's just probably ingrained. I can tell. I love to hear people's definition of that word. What would be your definition of the word intentional?
Intentional to me means that you've given something thought, like that you had a plan and then you followed through with that plan, even if the plan wasn't exactly laid out, right? Maybe a framework is a better use than a plan, because a framework can be flexible. A plan, you think of like A, B, C, D, not necessarily, but a framework for decision making. So you know that you're doing right by yourself and the other stakeholders that you're thinking about in that equation.
I love it. Camille, if there's a place to reach you, follow you, learn more, what's the best place for people to reach out?
Yeah. So email is Camille at wearehuman8, and that's a number 8.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Camille Nicita on LinkedIn. Probably the best places.
Thank you so much for spending the time.
This was so fun.
It was so fun. Thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure.